Today's episode is a behind the scenes look at what a typical day would look like when I was selling 150 homes a year personally with an assistant. Since then, I've stepped into a full-time non-selling CEO role for a real estate team, and I've also built a real estate investment firm that I oversee with over 100 million in assets under management. But today is all about when I was selling 150 homes personally. I'm going to share the complete breakdown. So if you've ever asked yourself, what does a full day look like for a high-performing agent? Or how do the top real estate agents structure their time? Or maybe what does it take hour by hour to produce at that next level? Well, you're about to find out. And by the end of this episode, you're going to have a full breakdown of what a real day in the life of an agent selling over 150 homes a year looks like. You're going to learn the tactical habits that you can apply right away and the amount of discipline required to actually sell that kind of volume each and every year. You ready? All right. So let's start with wake up time. So there's big debate whether to wake up early or, some agents stay up really late and then they start later. For me, most of the time I was up at 6 a.m. So between 6 a.m. and 8, this was my prep time. And I'm going to share what I would do when I woke up at 6 a.m. So started with, there was a late night negotiation that happened the night before, but I'd wake up at 6, I'd go over a prayer for myself, and I'd actually repeat my goal card as well. And so part of that was going over what I'm actually thankful for. So, some recommend that you actually write down what you're thankful for. I think that's good, but for me, it was just thinking it and feeling the good feelings of what it was that I was thankful for in that morning. I would also hydrate with some lemon water. So I just get some lemon and I would squeeze it in. And I would do a workout while listening to a great motivational speaker. Generally, it was Jim Rohn. Jim Rohn, if you haven't heard of him, he has some really just overall great principles when it comes down to living your life in the right method, the right way anyways. And so getting a good message in while I was working out was a way of stacking it together. Now, the reason why I would work out in the morning is because when my day started, there was no way that I would be able to get the workout in, go home and shower, and go back out. So when I would go into work, I was ready to go locked and loaded for the day. So that's why I would get it in early, because I would never happen later. And for the times I'd say, I'll do when I get home later, I was just done at that point. So getting the workout in the morning was really, really important. The next thing that I did was had a very good breakfast, generally protein filled. So eggs, bacon, black coffee, that was something that I would have. And when I woke up, by this time, my kids were getting up, getting ready for school. And so the one thing that I would always do when the boys would come up, we have 3 boys, is I would tell them that I love them. So I would walk up to them and give them a hug and tell them that I love them. And so this was something that I did all the time whenever I saw them. It was just a good way to connect in the morning. And then once I was ready to go, showered up, got my suit on. I always had a suit, by the way, whenever I went out. This is something that you'll generally always see me in the blue suit as well here. But it wasn't always blue when I was selling like that. But the point there is that you want to look good. You want to be ready to go when you're out on appointments, when you're heading into work. So the other thing that I would do, and this is something that we structured ahead of time, is that we hired any outsourcing that we could. So anybody to cut the grass or to remove the snow, that was not something, as soon as I had enough money, I hired somebody to remove the snow for us. I wasn't out there early shoveling because at that point it was very expensive for me to do any work at the house. So we outsourced that. So when I was leaving and any sort of, snow came from the previous night, they would come at 5 a.m. early, and by the time I was ready to drive out the driveway, it was perfectly plowed, ready to go. The other thing was actually having cleaners come in. And so when I was leaving, generally that's when the cleaners would come in and they would help us with the overall cleaning of the house. And so At this point, my wife was very involved with the business as well. So leveraging that was pivotal to ensure that we maintain a cleanly house, which was really important for us, but we could also have more time to do the higher income producing activities for both my wife and and myself. So when I got to the office, generally is around 8:30, but 8 o'clock was generally what it was. And so this is generally well before most people arrived. And so the first thing I would do when I would go in is I would actually write down the top 3 priorities. So these are my big 3 goals for the day. That would be the first thing. And then I would finalize my listing submission paperwork. So generally there's like, okay, I'm going to finalize it, and I'd have that ready to go for my assistant. And I would have that ready to go. And then I would organize all the deals. I would mentally know, okay, these are the 6 deals that I'm negotiating. And I would just have it, okay, this is where we're at, this is where we're at, this is where we're at. I would ensure that I'm checking all the deadlines so I'm not missing anything. It's very easy to miss one. And to keep things organized in regards to the deals. At that point, what I would do is, and this is all before 9 o'clock, I would review the hot sheet from the day before, and I would cross-reference any active buyers that I was working with at that point. And generally at this point, it wasn't heavy into buyers, but there were still some buyers that I was working with at that point. I would cross-reference and I would see the hot sheet as maybe there was a really good deal that came on as well at that point. So I would go through the hot sheet and I would send those emails to these active clients saying, hey, listen, this might be one that we want to check out. And then what I would do is I'd prepare my call list for the morning. So generally what that would look like would be 3 past clients, 10 prospect conversations. I'd be, okay, these are the ones I'm going to be reaching out to, 10 active clients. And I would also have scheduled any negotiation follow-up calls that are ready to go for the negotiation that I would continue from the day before. And so I would have the list ready to go. And so this was really important because I followed this 9 a.m. rule. And so for me, I wanted to get all my non-client conversations worked before 9 a.m. Because at 9 a.m., we're talking to people. Your success, and I knew that my success during the day was directly related to the number of conversations that I had. So if I was doing paperwork in the middle of the day, this was, for me, was very inefficient use of my time at that point. And so at 9 a.m. came, it was like, okay, this is sprint time. So I had to be prepared for that 9 a.m. to start where I'm not, between 9 and 9:30, I'm preparing, okay, who am I going to call? I was ready. I was locked in. I had everything prepared from the day before for my assistant to go and process, and then I could be out for the day ready to rock and roll. So between 9 and 11:30, what I would do when 9 o'clock came out, I'd actually have a in-conference sign that I flipped and put outside my door, and everybody knew that in conference meant, please do not disturb me during this time. Now, our team, we like calling this power hour. And so this is something that you're powering through during that period between 9 and 11:30. And so I turned off all notifications as well. And then I started my sprint, making my calls. And so this is something that I would do between 9 and 11:30. And then when 11:30 hit, generally what happens is I'm actually leaving the office at that point. So I'm going out of the office. I'm doing all my in-person meetings. Generally, I would have 2 listing appointments before I would go home for dinner. And so the lunch generally, and I wasn't always perfect with this, if I could bring a lunch, that was great, but sometimes I'd have to stop in somewhere. But the key that I had was that I had to get some protein into me in the afternoon. And if I didn't, and I mean, a couple times I didn't get this right. I remember one time I had Doritos for lunch, drinking a Red Bull, and I hit a wall at about 1 or 2 o'clock. Like I was just falling asleep. So I learned my lesson. So protein is something that you want to make sure that you get for lunch. So whether it's some steak or chicken, that's going to help sustain your energy levels to be able to get you to dinner time. And if you don't do that, if you eat very high carb meal, by the late afternoon, I found that I was starting to take a nosedive and I wasn't at my best in my appointments at that point. So I would be in back-to-back listing appointments. Generally, that was a couple of hours each for the 2 listing appointments that would be booked before dinner. Now, in between listing appointments and on the way to the listing appointment, generally I'd be negotiating offers along the way, and I'd be having those phone calls to keep those deals moving. So whether that's with my client or it's with the other agent as well. But during that time, it had to be like hardcore focus. I wasn't like dilly-dallying around. I wasn't checking the news. I was like from one appointment to the next. And so the other thing was when I was heading into appointments, I was always mentally turning the page, so to speak, closing the chapter to the other things that I was doing prior to that, being 100% dialed in that at this point, nothing else matters. All the negotiations, nothing else matters except for this client I'm about to go see. That was really, really important because if I had my mind on the 10 other things that were going on at that point, the client would feel that. And so the mission always when I went into a listing appointment was to take the listing, sign it, finish the taking all the notes. I wouldn't have to call back or come back the next day. So I would do all my research in prior to going out as well. And generally that would be before 9 o'clock. I would have everything ready to go for the listing appointment. That'd be another item that I would do as well before that 9 o'clock so that I was ready to go. And so generally at 11:30, I would do a quick check before heading out the door that I had everything. And so you want to make sure you have your lockbox. You want to make sure you have your listing file ready to go. And it reminds me, when I was a hockey player, there was one time that I forgot my skates and the game was 3 hours away. And so I drove there and I remember I had to borrow skates for the game. Somebody had an extra pair and I wore them and it was a horrible experience for me. So since then, I had a little bit of a checklist before going out to the hockey game. You know, I'd start with long johns, t-shirt, I'd wear my knee pads, socks, pants, get my skates on, t-shirt, shoulder pads, elbow pads, and then I'd have my jersey, gloves, helmet, skates. And so this was something that, and mouth guard, it's funny because I still play that in my mind right now, and this is like decades later. But before you go on your listing appointment, you want to go through your checklist to make sure that you didn't forget anything. Because when you're on the appointment, you're about to walk in and you forgot your lockbox, for example, now you got to drive back the next day to do it once you sign the agreement. So have your checklist ready to go. And so that was something that I would do as well before heading out at 11:30 for my appointments, as I would be ready to go with everything because I know I wasn't coming back to the office in between. So that was really important. So I would go into the both appointments. The goal would be to sign them. And then what would happen is around 5 o'clock, generally, I would go home for dinner. So I knew I had to get my work done. And so in general, it was between like 4:30 and 6. I wouldn't be booking appointments. And so this was the rule, and there were exceptions to this, but in general, I would go home for dinner. I would go and relax, eat dinner with the family. Joanna knew that I was coming home around that time. And then I would eat, and then I would lay down on the couch for a minute or two, and then it would be like, okay, 1, 2, 3, go. And I would get back up, get my suit back on, and I would head back out. Now, I did this for years. I would go back out after, and I would go generally on another listing appointment in the evening because there were many clients that could only meet late at night. And so on the way there, I'd continue to be negotiating on Bluetooth, of course, and you don't want to be holding your phone as you're driving around. That have it on your Bluetooth. And I would be going, at that point, I would need to fight through this tiredness. And so for me, it was always Rocky Balboa, you know, the Eye of the Tiger. This is something that the Rocky music always got me lit up before going on my appointment. And this would get me into another state so that I was prepared when I walked in, that I was 100%. Because just remember that clients they only sell a home like once every 7 years. So when they're meeting you, they might be interviewing other people, or you might be the only one, but you want to provide a phenomenal experience and you want to be ready that they're the only client in your world. And so I would head back out for that listing appointment and I would play that music so I was ready to go. And I would get to the end of the appointment. And for me, it was really important that when I got to the end, that I reminded myself, okay, the goal here is to get the signed agreement. And so I would sign it and I would go right. And there were sometimes it was like 10 o'clock at night, I'd be wrapping it all up. But the mission was to get the signature and to wrap that all up. Now, once I left, I would finish off any last minute negotiations. And then I would get home and it would be a day, we'll say, to look back on and say, yeah, that was a very good day because I got my calls in and we'll just say, I got all the main dollar producing activities complete. And then it was rinse and repeat. You do that again and again and again. Now, a couple of things to note that buyer showings were more of the exception during the week. I would stack those generally on the weekend where I would slide those in and then I would slide in listing appointments in between if possible. Generally, Saturday evenings were not big for booking appointments, but negotiations would happen. Like I could go out for an evening and then I would make the odd negotiation call here and there. And what I also found was that I didn't need to book Sunday morning appointments. I would always go to church. Generally, most of the time I'd be going to church. And so anything before 12, I didn't need to book. Even when I started, I booked my open houses after 12. And so that was fine. Generally, people are pretty understanding that you don't book appointments before, say, 12 o'clock on Sunday and then Saturday evenings. And so those are, we'll say you can block those off as in you already have an appointment ready to go. So no Saturday evening appointments or Sunday morning for me. And that would be my schedule. So some of the things looking back and reflecting on that day, what are some of the things that I did? Well, I started by feeding my mind and my body with food and the right information to get me started right. Because if you start your day right, that first hour is so important. If you start that right, you get energy throughout the entire day. You're not going to be hitting sugar crashes, and you're not going to start to have these negative mental loops in your mind when you're going out. Now, the one thing that I didn't mention this, but when I go to bed, what you're thinking about before going to bed is really important as well, that you're not thinking negative thoughts, that you're thinking positive and thankful thoughts before you fall asleep. So the other thing that I did was I outsourced any work that was, we'll just say I could hire for less money than my time was worth. And so hiring somebody to remove the snow, cut the grass, clean the house, this was something that I did and continue to do to this day. It's very, very important to stack your time and to do the work that you are paid to do. And so let others do the lower income work and do the higher producing work for yourself. So the other thing I did was that all non-client conversation work was done before 9 a.m. So anything that didn't need to have a conversation with, I want to get that done. So at 9 o'clock, I can be on the phone having conversations. I preloaded my call list, so that was ready to go, which removed decision fatigue. And this is a big thing that I see with agents today is like they're getting ready to make the next call. And so they're not sure who to call, and they're going on their CRM. They're like, who should I call next? Instead of being ready to go. And you can get through many more calls if you pre-decide before 9 a.m. the calls that you're going to make. And then I batch my calls and my tasks. You notice that I did that. And I eliminated distractions. So I put the sign on the door. All my notifications were off. I didn't have emails popping up and, social dings here and there, social media. That was not turned on. That was text messages were all turned off. And so this was focus, follow through. And I continued to do that until I got through my work. Then you'll notice that the music help reset and energize me in the evening. This was a big part to high productivity, to keep me going and keep me motivated throughout the day, and to have that energy management side of it. And I was able to see my family as well. This is a big misconception that I hear, is like, I never get to see my family because I'm working so much. Parkinson's law says that you will finish your work in the time that you give it. And so if you give yourself 10 hours to do something, it'll take you 10 hours. If you take that same work and you compress it and say, I have to get this done by within 5 hours, then this law says that you'll get it done. And so a really good movie that shows you that is In Pursuit of a Happiness, where Will Smith played the character of, he was a single dad, and he had to get all of his work done before he picked up his kid. It was around 4 or 5 o'clock. And so he had to get all of his work done, where others that he was competing against were spending time into the night. But he did everything he had to do to get his work done, and he actually beat the other candidates for the job in the end. I'm spoiling the movie if you haven't seen it. But the point there is that if you give yourself a deadline to get your work done, this will force you to get it done, and you'll be able to get more done in less time and see your family. So it's like a win-win-win. And I'll just say that if your family is good, you will be good at work. And so this is really powerful to go home, be intentional when you're at home. Actually look at your kids and, speak to your spouse and have the conversations, and then go back out after. It's re-energizing, and they'll support you when you're going out and conquering the land, rather than, I never get to see my dad or my mom. And so the other thing that I did is I said no to anything that slowed my momentum. So I was like hardcore focused. Anything that came up, I was like, I'm staying focused on what it is that I'm doing, because this is the most important thing right now. The other thing that I did was to tie all this together is that I would finish strong, as in at the end of the day, I would always close the loop on all the communications that I had for that day. And then what I call, Darren Hardy actually taught me this, he says to close the store. So you want to go back through all your emails and texts before you turn off your phone, and you want to circle back with them so that you're not waking up in the middle of the night saying, oh, I forgot to get back to that person, or having to apologize the next day. So this is really powerful from a start to the finish as well, to be able to go to bed and put your head on your pillow at the end of the day and feel good about yourself. Now, this wasn't one special day. It was the standard. And I did this for years. Now, there were some days that I would wake up a little bit later. I had like a really late negotiating night. There were some days it was like 1 a.m. But this was the standard. And so there was exceptions to that, where maybe I would sleep in and I would get to the office a little late. But that was the rhythm that I followed for years, which helped me be very productive year after year after year. And so when I was doing this, I was still leading the team, doing over 1,000 sales at that point. And so this is something, it's not for the faint of heart, but what I found was that mastery of my craft was slowly coming together. And so what happened was, just like when I was growing up, as I got better after taking thousands of shots, I loved shooting more. And so as I was going on more appointments and I followed the same process, I'd figure out how to do things a little better. And it was like a craft that was slowly starting to come together for me. And so I was starting to have more fun going on these appointments. It was like art being done when you do it on a regular basis. And so this led to better results, which led to having more fun. And so this is what it can be for you as well if you follow this process. It's really important for you to know that in order to be a top producer, you don't need more hours in the day. And I hear this a lot. I need more hours in the day. The reality is that you need more focus in the hours you already have. All successful agents have the same amount of time that you do. And so having that standard is what makes the difference. You don't need perfect conditions. You need a standard of how you're going to attack your day. Now, if this was valuable to you, I want to encourage you and ask you to share it with another agent and to subscribe to the channel where we are building a community of full out real estate agents. And if you're ready to start building long-term wealth beyond commission checks, I want to invite you to come and partner with me on our next real estate opportunity in the United States. Visit fulloutinvesting.com to learn more about this opportunity and for more information and a simple deal of what that actually looks like. Let's grow together. I love you guys and keep going full out.